First up, we are going to hear from Laila Namdarkhan. She's a qualified mental health nurse. She's worked with women detained in psychiatric forensic settings or stroke prisons. She's a lifelong radical feminist and co-founder of Women's Refuge and Women's Centres. She's going to talk about women in NHS psychiatric service. So NHS is the National Health Service in the UK, psychiatric services, and the decades-long background to the establishment of single-sex accommodation policy. So thank you so much, Laila, and over to you.
I really want to talk about the past 10 years that I worked in high secure psychiatric forensic services with women. And prior to that, my involvement in mental health with women in learning disabled institutions. My expertise is derived from those areas over 30 years of work on behalf of women, both in terms of running what I would consider to be investigations into sexual abuse and violence against women within these organizations and in prisons, and in other areas to improve their voices and to be a conduit for them to speak as an advocate, which I was for the past 10 years of my professional life, running a team into these high secure places that were invisible to the rest of the public. I want to present this because I feel very strongly that the work that's been done on this particular issue of single-sex services in our NHS, National Health Service in general, has been a long battle. Prior to 1960s, and including 1948, the inception of the health service in this country, single-sex services were the norm across the board of health. And then in the 1960s, you had the psychiatric intervention, which wanted to be progressive and use terms like men behave better when women and men are housed together in mental health services, without any form of awareness of the risks that they were taking on behalf of women. Women's routine journey through mental health services was predicated upon their return to feminization and their ability to be subdued and to be biddable again. And this was logged against men who had no such impositions placed upon them. So if we go to look at the 30 years campaign, so in from the 1960s, psychiatric hospitals became mixed sex in many ways. And then in 1970, the general hospitals took that on board, not because it was good for improved treatment, but it was a saving money opportunity, which of course the NHS is very renowned for, saving money rather than calling it cuts. So these wards became mixed sex. And then as we progressed through the 70s and the 80s into the 1990s, they began to get TV reports, consumer organizations, feminists, Royal College of Nursing, Women's Institute, all of these organizations were clamoring now because there'd been severe reports of abuse in terms of the general population using mixed sex services. They didn't like it. They felt their privacy was invaded. They didn't like sharing toilets with men on the ward. And this was true of psychiatric hospitals as well. My research was a result in 1994-95 was based upon the experience of learning disabled women who were held in forensic services and other years of experience. This involved me interviewing women. And if I give you some of the examples of what happened while I was interviewing, you'll get an understanding of how life was like in incarcerated institutions. While interviewing one woman, I was in her room and felt it was private. And then suddenly there was a banging on the door, and the woman stood up in sharp alarm and ran to the door to try and lock it to stop people coming in. And the person outside was a male voice demanding, "I want sex with you." And these were incidents that were quite common within these mixed sex services for the mental health women, and also for women in general hospitals who felt that they were subjected to naked men, and many men did not like also the situation. The evidence-based felt to women who talked to me that they lived under a siege mentality. Broverman's research of the 1970s had warned the system that to do such things was awful, because she had done research into women's prisons about how they had coping strategies. And when they were placed with men in mental hospitals and general hospitals, those coping strategies of self-harm, of withdrawal, of feeling oppressed were manifested even further. So those warnings had been there for a very, very long time, and people had ignored them because they want to save money, and it was no favor to anyone. And then it brings us on to the long journey. It took 30 years after the clamor from all of the people who were against the mixed sex wards to come into fruition. In 2012, the NHS declared that they were giving a commitment. NHS England made a commitment through their constitution to ensure that everyone was able to access single-sex services and single-sex facilities while in patients in our hospitals. And this has worked fairly well for the last few years. Lots of money was poured into returning to single-sex wards, lots of investment by us, the taxpayer and the government, to bring this to fruition. But it took a long time to get there again. But in 2019, when there was a review of the single-sex accommodation policy by the NHS, they added Annex B. And Annex B detailing the rights to choose your own gender when you access NHS services. I want to leave you now, and I'll hand over to Anna, with just this quote from Germaine Greer from her book, The Whole Woman, which was printed in 1999. I recommend it as a read to everyone. And the chapter entitled Pantomime Dames, and it reads as follows. His intentions are no more honorable than any female impersonator. His achievement is to gag all those who would call his bluff. When he forces his way into the few private spaces women enjoy and shout down their objections and bombards the women who will not accept him with threats and hate mail, he does as rapists have always done, silence women. And this is what is going to happen if we aren't able to regain our sex-based rights.